Hello, Cape Crusaders. Please join me in welcoming a very special guest to our show. He's directed around 100 episodes of the DCAU, so I won't list them all as we'll be here all day, but the Batman episodes he directed are Zatanna, Blind as a Bat, See No Evil, Fire from Olympus, Trial, Riddler's Reform, Baby Doll, Time Out of Joint, Batgirl Returns, Lock Up, Holiday Nights, Cold Comfort, Joker's Millions, The Ultimate Thrill, Critters, Legends of the Dark Knight, and Beware the Creeper, as well as a sequence director on Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Dan Riba to our show. Dan, how are you?
Fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is, and Will is also here, as always.
I am also here. Hello.
Hello as well.
I got to find a better way to intro you besides
I like the way that you just say, and my brother's here. So that's fine. It works.
I'm sure there's a few listeners who are like, oh, thank God Will's there. I don't have to listen to just Alex.
Yeah.
Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. As I just listed, there were so many episodes, and we were just talking off a pod about some of them as well. So I'd love to be able to chat about all of them, but we'd never get any sleep, and we'd be here forever. So, yeah, I guess we'll go through some episodes in particular today. But before all of that, I'm sure you've answered this before, but I'm super curious. How did you start as a director on Batman, the animated series?
Well, I started as a character designer initially. I was going to be a storyboard artist. I wanted to be a storyboard artist, but Bruce needed character designers immediately. And that was where he was lacking. And my friend Kevin Altieri had let me know about the job. And I had been directing a DEEC, but I was planning a wedding, and I knew I had a bunch of stuff going on in my life, and I knew that I was going to be very busy, and I knew directing on the show was going to take a lot of effort and time. Right. And so I thought, okay, look, I'd rather do something that's a little less involved. And so I didn't even ask for the job. I didn't even push for that. And so when I started, I was doing turnarounds and helping mold what the Man-Bat design was going to be.
Oh, is that one of the characters that you conceptualized?
I did not design him. Okay. That was Mike Kim. But I'm the one who kind of Bruce definitely wanted a monster feel to it, and he just couldn't get it. He was getting a lot of cool stuff from Kevin Nolan, and he was doing stuff, and we were both hashing it out together, and we were getting closer and closer, but it wasn't it. It wasn't quite it. And then Mike Kim came aboard, and he nailed it. He got exactly what Bruce wanted. But I really wanted to have his hands be wings. It always bothered me that his bones came out of his wrists, and his wings just did not make any sort of scientific sense at all. Right. And I thought the whole point of a bat is that its hands are its wings. Chiroptera, that's what it's a hand wing. And so I came up with that idea, and that was incorporated into the design. So I was very proud of that. That the very first idea I had, I said, we got to do this. And Bruce was like, okay, you want that? Sure, let's do that. And he wanted to make the show have its own mark away from the comics, so he was really cool with that.
That's great, man. Yeah, that's always been a fantastic design, and just really haunting as a kid as well. Like that transformation sequence. It's just, Will makes fun of me.
That was Kevin. That was Kevin.
Yeah.
I did clean up on that board though, so I got to draw the Man-Bat, a lot on.
Did you?
So it was really fun.
That's great. So, what characters do you remember having any conceptual, input on that was what we saw on screen?
Well, to be honest, I was mostly like the nuts and bolts. I did a lot of incidental characters. And so, all the main characters Bruce did, Mignola did Mr. Freeze initially, and we all kind of cleaned up the designs. And so I was doing turnarounds. I was doing a lot of incidental criminals and but no major, I didn't do Clayface. I did posing on Alfred. I did posing on characters. I did turnarounds, a lot of that. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts animation stuff that sort of grunt work that has to get done for the studios overseas. And I was doing a lot of that back then, before we had a staff doing that stuff. So I did the turnarounds on Dick Grayson and on Robin. I did turnarounds on Bruce and a lot of the main characters, and then a lot of redresses of characters. I did Penguin turnarounds. I did, his redressing for, certain things, things like that.
This has literally been the last 3 weeks of my life. I've literally just done this for a manga / animation. They needed turnarounds of all these different characters, and that's been my life. So I actually really enjoy that part of the job. Like, I feel like the pressure's off a little bit because you're not presenting so much to the world. It's more behind the scenes, and I don't know. I personally really enjoy that side of art.
So, I mean, so a lot of times, like, we wouldn't get it designed out in time for storyboard stuff for incidental characters. So you'd be basing it on the storyboard because you didn't want it to violate what was done there. And if that was approved and people were okay with it, then you're just, okay, you do that. And then the layouts would be done in those poses. So a lot of my character designs are just like crowd people in the poses from the boards. I did a lot of the monster stuff, the hallucinations from the first Scarecrow episode. I did a lot of that.
Oh, wow.
Stuff.
Okay, cool.
I don't think I did the main, like, Batman Bat Demon thing. I think Bruce did that, but I did a lot of that, like giant skeletal thing, and the skeleton. That was mine. And
I love that giant skeleton.
Yeah.
I did the incidental bats. I found a whole page of bats that are really adorable, and I'm like, oh, those are cute. I did those.
So you were conceptualizing, and then the chance to direct was presented to you, and Zatanna was the first episode.
Right. Well, Dick Sebast left. He found an offer at I think it was H&B, and so he decided it was time to leave, and so he left in the middle of Zatanna. And so that's why I have the show had already been in the works. I came aboard to finish it off, basically.
Right.
I finished some storyboard stuff on it, and then kind of saw it through. But while I was doing that, I was also overseeing the layouts for What Is Reality, the Riddler show. So I redid a lot of the layouts for that, and then my first full show on my own was Blind as a Bat.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just coincidentally, I don't say coincidentally, I watch the show all the time, whether I do a podcast or not. And that just happens to be because there's episodes that are in my remit that I watch all the time. Right. And then sometimes I'm like, I haven't watched Blind as a Bat in a while because, we just reviewed I've Got Batman in My Basement. Surprisingly, not as bad as we remembered. We root for the underdogs as well.
So. Yeah, I love it. Of course.
Yeah. But Blind as a Bat was always one where I was like, oh, it's just a penguin and Batman's blind. But watching that again the other day, I was like, this is a good episode, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, what was really neat about it too is like I get the script. I'm first time directing on the show, and I read it, and I'm bothered by an aspect of it that has since actually nobody gives a crap about, but it bothers me because in my mind, Bruce Wayne is the philanthropist millionaire. The Wayne Foundation is a big deal. I don't think of him as the Wayne Tech armorer guy. Right. In my mind, he was never Tony Stark. In my mind, and I know that has since happened through Christopher Nolan's films. He sort of, justified all of his armaments by having come through Wayne Tech. But I always felt like, the guy doesn't like guns. He
wouldn't have an attack helicopter.
He wouldn't have an attack helicopter. Yeah. So when this came, to me, I was like, well, do I say anything? This really feels so anti what the character is. So I mentioned it to Alan, and he went, yeah, okay. Well, we're not going to change it because it's
it's locked, yeah.
but we should address it. We should talk about it. And so he has a line or two about his misgivings about building this weapon.
Yeah.
And I was so floored that that my input was respected, and already right off the bat, my first time director, and I'm like going, hey, I want to change this. And I felt like, I didn't want to be, I'm not ungrateful for the position, but I also wanted to feel like you have a little bit of input. And it's funny because originally the attack helicopter was going to be more of a it was going to be a police helicopter. It was going to be more of a direct lift from Blue Thunder, really.
Right.
It was the idea was it was a police helicopter that he's helping the police with, and it'd be like rubber bullets or whatever, I guess. I don't know. But the idea was riot control. And then we had riots in Los Angeles.
Oh, no, right.
And so they were, well, we can't do that. It wasn't the networks, and we just went,
wow.
We really can't. We self-censored ourselves, going, this is look bad.
Not the right time for an episode.
This is not exactly the smart thing to do here. So we had to change it to a military vehicle, and that also turned Bruce Wayne more into an arms dealer,
Right, right, yeah.
So he had to kind of be cautious about that and kind of like tiptoe around it, because it was like the story changed on us.
Well, there are some later episodes, in the Superman show, when they did the first team up between Batman and Superman, World's Finest, I think it was like 3 episodes and just made into a mini movie or stuff. And there's a scene where Lex Luthor is showing Bruce Wayne, like, hey, we're making these killer robots and they're weapons and they're going to be used. And Wayne's like, nah. So I guess maybe even from that episode and later on down the line, they're like, Bruce Wayne wouldn't be, and it was great to see Lex Luthor be the arms dealer. That makes sense.
Exactly.
And for Bruce Wayne to be like, no, I'm not into that. Yeah. It's good stuff.
So I kind of feel like, hey, maybe I had some input, So that's
awesome.
Cool.
I love that. So what was the storyboarding process like for you on the show?
For me, because I was mostly a character designer, I came in to help from time to time. So there was a section, I'd help clean up boards for Kevin, because I was in the room with Kevin. So I'd help do that, facilitate stuff, and I would also, I did a little section of POV. So I did board a little bit here and there on the show,
Okay.
and you have fun with the script. You interpret what, and you play with it. They really wanted to goose the action and make it as exciting as possible. And look at a lot of Hitchcock and Fritz Lang and just get that sense of noir, that world, those kind of compositions and that kind of feel.
Yeah, Frank Parr just said the same thing recently, and I love that that's what you referred to as directors, to find your influence.
Orson Welles, Alfred Hitchcock, Fritz Lang, the classic, Howard Hawks and Houston, all of the classic noir directors.
Yeah, it's always reminded me like of Maltese Falcon and Double and Enemy and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's what we were shooting for, and sometimes we got it. It's like
I did.
I think Baby Doll is like the whole ending is very Lady from Shanghai, kind of the mirrors and all of that stuff, and it's.
I've never even thought about it like that. That's really cool.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, okay, you just mentioned Baby Doll, so let's start talking about some episodes and such. Now, Baby Doll obviously is a Paul Dini creation. Came out of nowhere as far as, again, I was talking about episodes that are in my like usual repetition and ones that are not. That is usually one that's not, because let's face it, I'm like, well, it's about a villain that thinks that she's like this little girl still and everything. But as you watch it more as an adult and understand how complex and dark and like
it is,
how like just how traumatized this woman is, it's an amazing episode.
Somebody brought something up recently. I was watching a video review of it, and somebody mentioned that things that we didn't actually like say out loud or maybe even think at the time, but clearly there's an element of her suicidal. Actually, that isn't like that cake that's going to explode is clearly she's taking them all with her,
right?
And we kind of weren't leaning into that. We were just making, she's crazy and whatever, but it's actually what is she trying to do here? What is the final intent? And it's like to recreate her life and then end it,
right.
And it didn't really, it's one of those things you watch a show years later going, oh my gosh, that's what we were doing.
Super dark. Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I get the metaphor for her shooting her mirror, her reflection. I mean, clearly it's metaphorical.
Yeah,
it didn't occur to me that it was literal as well. And,
right.
that's.
So what was your first impression when that script came to you, right? Like, where you were like, it's about what?
No. I was totally into it. I loved it, and we had some wonderful designs of the character, and so I tend to like doing cartoony stuff anyway. So this idea of like this infusion of this really cartoony element into this serious noir world was this wonderful juxtaposition, like the Joker, the clown, the light versus the dark. It was another take on that kind of thing. It's there's oh my gosh, the Bad Seed. There's that film about an evil child that's a murderer. And she just looks like this innocent little girl, and so.
Is it called The Orphan? Is that what it was called?
No, that's a newer version. This is a film called The Bad Seed.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This what's her name? McCormick, the actress's name. It was really, really cool film, and very, very dark. Based on a play, and I think in the play she gets away with it, but in the movie they couldn't have that, so they just have her get hit by lightning. Like,
it's an easy way to get rid of someone, I guess. Yeah.
She's just too evil to live. It's like you just smite her.
That's cool though, man. Like, it is an episode on paper that I look at and I'm like, that sounds very weird, but then you watch it and it's amazing.
Yeah, but also it was based on because superficially it's based on Shirley Temple, which I'll mention something else a little bit, but the idea of it was based on the idea on the fact that there was a rash of child actors that were having problems with crime and various addictions and issues with their lives. And it was a whole bunch in a row that we just kept hearing about this person having problems and this person having problems and this person having problems. And so it was sort of based loosely on the headlines, actually, of that. And they just sort of like, well, who is the first child star? Oh, it's Shirley Temple. Let's go back and let's reframe this as a story from the past, essentially. But it's based on the idea of the sitcom thing, where it's like the sitcom star going bad.
No, I've never even thought about it like that too. That's really cool. I love that. It gives it more depth as well. Now I'm going to watch it and be like, this episode's even better now. I know that. That's fun.
It was always slightly Sunset Boulevard to me, not in the sense. I mean, she was aging.
That's exactly it too. It's Sunset Boulevard, but with a child. That's
the way I've always interpreted it.
Yes, that's exactly.
That's cool.
No, it's really neat. With the other thing too, that it's very layered. We did like the Gilligan's Island reference and all this stuff. But what's also funny is that the cousin Spunky character is based on a character from the Brady Bunch. And we actually had that actor come in and do a voice. Oddly enough, he didn't do the voice of the character that we designed after him. He played the older brother character, but we actually, when he came in to record, Bruce was like, "Oh, I love that look. That's the kid. That's the guy." So he did a caricature of him from the record, and that was the character, Spunky grown up.
Awesome.
It was really neat.
Imagine being that kid and being like, I'm now immortalized as this cartoon character in this episode forever. Yeah, that's cool.
And the sister was played by Judy Strangis, who was, I don't know if you recall, Electro Woman and Dyna Girl, but she was Dyna Girl on that. But her father had been on the Batman, the original 66 Batman show.
All right. As who?
He was, no, not an actor. He was actually like a producer on the series.
Oh, okay.
And so he was in production, and he directed some episodes later on. And she was actually in some crowd scenes when she was a teenager.
Wow.
So it was really neat. Oh, I'll show you this guy. This since you guys can see, this is me.
You're wearing the same shirt? Are you like a Simpsons character? Do you have the same outfit?
Bruce made that for me back in the day while we were working on the show. He's a Captain Picard figure that he turned.
Oh, I can see the Captain Picard.
That's amazing. I love that. Oh, that's really cool.
So.
When did he give that to you? It
was some birthday or Christmas ages ago while we were on the show.
That's cool. That's really cool. So the episode that I really want to talk to you about is an episode that's very near and dear to both me and my brother. One that we absolutely adore which is Trial. Any memories? How was it pitched to you? Any information about Trial you can give us? We're all ears, man.
First off, I have to say that my initial reaction was jealousy and anger, because when we were pitching ideas, people were pitching ideas for the feature, and even for an episode, I kept thinking, I would really love to do Batman in Arkham, a kangaroo court situation where the inmates are have a jury, the whole M thing. I would love to see this. I want to do this. And I hadn't actually formulated a story, a plot, anything. I just this is what I want to see. And before I even had a chance to pitch the idea, Paul had this outline that he had suggested for the feature. But
it goes to show you had a great idea, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm so blessed and lucky that it came to me, because I'm like, well, I get to have ownership of this idea that even though it was Paul's, I had it too.
You're not the only guests who have just said man, Paul Dini was just always there and always with the ideas, Just brilliant.
No, it's true. It's oh my gosh, So I was very lucky about that. And then the other thing that was wonderful was just the record of having everybody together at the record was wonderful. Absolutely, it was so cool. And to get to meet Roddy McDowell, that was wild. When I was talking to Bob Skur, he said that when he wrote Lockup, there was a scene where Scarecrow was scared to go back into Arkham because he's like, look at me, Batman, I'm the master of fear and I'm scared. But then he was told, oh, well, we could do Mad Hatter. And he was like, oh, that means I might be able to meet Roddy McDowell, so I'll change it. And it never ended up going to the script. And he was like, and it works with the Scarecrow. But it works much better.
Roddy McDowell was a big deal, wasn't he?
Yeah. So that was, I was a little intimidated when I met him, as was with Paul Williams, frankly. There was a couple of other guest stars on that episode on Blind as a Bat that I kind of started talking to more. But I always loved Phantom of the Paradise, so I always wanted to talk to Paul Williams about that. But I didn't get a chance to.
Yeah, we just discovered, just by doing the Batman in My Basement review, how much of a songwriter Paul Williams is. You're like, the Penguin wrote how many songs?
It's my goodness. It's genius. Genius. Absolutely. Oh, have you ever seen Phantom of the Paradise?
No, I haven't.
Just getting a smile. Okay. So go watch it then.
It's my favorite Brian De Palma movie, actually. Okay. It's a rock and roll take on Phantom of the Opera. And it's very dark, very dark. But it's comedic, it's campy, but it's still has so much heart. The songs are great. It's really, really cool. I like it better than Phantom of the Opera. Actually, I think as a musical, it actually works much better for me than the Andrew Lloyd Webber thing. And it actually,
oh wow,
that's it was. And it was actually very influential in Japan. That image, that mask, and also Paul Williams, they made him a villain in a Lupin film. So it was they based, it was, yeah.
Yeah,
that sounds cool.
And I didn't even get a chance to talk to him about it because I was just too hum.
So yeah, with
Trial,
with Trial,
Well, that's how we are about Trial.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite comedic lines of all time. One of my favorite of all time is in that episode, and it's just when Judge Joker comes out and he doesn't say a single word and he sits down and he just goes, bang, guilty. And that's his contribution to the trial. I think it's one of the most genius comedic lines of all time.
Yeah, it is amazing. And what's funny is that so because I do a lot of editing for TikTok and social media for this podcast, I was editing a scene, so I take clips from the show and lay it over stuff we're saying, which has been a lot of fun to do on our episode reviews. And I took a clip from Trial. And I noticed, and this is what will lead me into my bigger question to you, but I noticed that when Two-Face asked for the verdict, Yeah, obviously there's all of the jury and they're all villains. And when they're going down the line of what they should do, Harley stands up and says, "Shoot him." And then Killer Croc says, "Hit him with a rock," which is a great line. And when Harley says, "Shoot him," Mad Hatter also mouths "shoot him" along with Harley. And I thought it was a really interesting little scene that I've never noticed. And it was only because I'm editing and I'm like, I'm watching it frame by frame. But when she says "shoot him," if you watch, it's just, that's what happens, right? With animation studios and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. The animators get confused as to who's speaking sometimes. And they'll mouth the words. And we probably were intending to retake that. And I think we might have, but it might be one of those things where the Warner Home Video has a tendency to go back to the original takes. This is one of those things that annoy me about the process, because they have this sort of archival sense of like, oh, the first version is the best. That's what was the intention. And what happens is when you're working in television, the process is slow in animation and you don't always get all the retakes in time. So you get it in the second or third airing, sometimes not even the second. You can't get it in time for so you actually, the second is really like the one that's the distilled perfect version a lot of the time, because you don't get all the mistakes in there, fixed in time. And the archive people never take that into consideration. They always go to the first take because somehow in their mind that's the best. And you're like, no, you morons. It's not the best. That's not our intention. We intended to fix this stuff. And you feel like, George Lucas going, no, we didn't shoot first. But it's not that case. We're not really we're not changing it. We actually fixed things that were wrong that we had intended to do in the first place. And, color mistakes or pops or things like that. And in some cases, those things had been fixed and they just didn't get in on time. So I vaguely remember calling that retake or noticing that. And until you mentioned it now, I'm like, oh, wait a second. I thought we fixed that.
Well, the reason why it's still one of my favorites, because one of my favorite movies of all time is 12 Angry Men. This is like the Batman the Animated Series version of 12 Angry Men, of everyone being like, this guy is guilty. And then slowly, as it goes on, everyone's opinion starts to change. And I just think that it's such a genius idea to have that in there. And I just think, on top of all that, it's a very well-directed episode. Like the way everything flows, like the introduction of the characters, like it's like I said, it's one of my top favorite, if not my favorite episode of the whole entire show.
I honestly, you get so close to stuff. All I see are problems. All I see are animation mistakes. All I see are the flaws. And so I kind of go, yeah, it's good, but it was supposed to be better. So, that's one of those things, and let's see, how do I put this? There was another awkward thing about it, was that the voice for Janet Van Dorn was replaced after the fact. So
really?
So we had cast someone else that she did great. There was nothing wrong with her performance. It really wasn't. But we had a sense when we were recording, or when we listened to the record, that it was a little severe, a little stern, and the character was supposed to ultimately take Batman's side eventually and be sympathetic, and there was something that wasn't as sympathetic in the tone of the voice, just the way, the performance was great. She was a wonderful actress, but it just something about the voice just felt a little cold. So they cast Stephanie Zimbalist, who had, was Ephraim's daughter,
from Alfred's daughter.
From Remington Steele.
I didn't know that.
And she was on, she was a star in Remington Steele, and she had actually, she knew Kevin. She had gone to Juilliard with Kevin.
Oh wow!
So it was like a neat little reunion. At the
and that must have been fun for them to like.
Yeah, but unfortunately, she didn't get to do the whole record, and they didn't record together. Like he had just finished his ADR,
right?
So she was in there alone, and so she never got a chance to feel like part of the family, in that sense. And I felt it sucked because, and the character started as like, antagonistic towards Batman, and then towards the end more sympathetic. I mean, just like Bullock and everybody eventually, Mayor Hill, everybody starts, fearing Batman, and then they kind of turn. And so it would have been neat to see her again, and they never. I don't think she came back. Nope. She was in an earlier show, but in a line, she had a line or two in an earlier show, but she didn't.
No, not after Trial. Yeah, we definitely don't see her come back.
We didn't see her again, and I was like, oh, that's
it was a cool character because she's the new DA, right? The last DA turned into Two-Face. So.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we should have turned her into something.
No, you gotta keep some people okay.
No, they all must become villains.
Three-Face.
we did that with Batman. We just talked about I got Batman in my basement, and me and my brother came up with the kid well, he doesn't kidnap Batman, but puts him in his basement. We made a whole side story where he becomes a villain and like a serial killer in the future and all this other stuff because something played
to put Batman in his basement again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like basically Norman Bates growing up. And he makes gunpowder in the basement as well because his mum's like, "Are you making gunpowder again?" We're like, "This kid's a little psychopath." It was that was an interesting episode.
Something in the Gotham Reservoir, I think.
Yes.
And so you mentioned with Trial, I think just briefly when we were talking about it, that originally it was an idea for the feature film that was eventually Mask of the Phantasm.
Right.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
So can you talk about?
Well, it wasn't originally per se. It was just that we had they were exploring ideas for the feature, and Paul had suggested the idea of this plot for the feature. And then Alan suggested a thing he called Masks at the time.
Right.
That was about the love of Bruce Wayne's life, and sort of it was like, okay, all right, it's got to be this. This is too all encompassing, and it's very emotional, and it really clicked. And then but fortunately
I don't know. A full length Trial movie sounds great to me. Like maybe the extended edition.
Yeah.
But I think so with Mask of the Phantasm, then what sequences did you direct on that?
Let's see, because I get confused about some of this because there's some things, and in fact, I in an interview I actually had misspoke because. It was because one of the characters I'd mentioned was actually the character that gets caught in the very beginning, and it's like, no, it wasn't that guy. It was killed in the beginning in the car. It was the funeral scene. I directed that in the very beginning.
What in the cemetery? In the cemetery,
the graveyard. That was the funeral, the graveyard scene. Mm. And I didn't board it, but I directed that. And then then there was a one of the Phantasm. I did a lot of stuff where Phantasm is encountering bodies. That one, and then Bruce Wayne discovering that the tall man was the Joker. The red pencil on the.
Oh, okay. Well, that was you. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. It's a great film, man. And as much as Trial, the extended edition would have been cool, I do love Mask of the Phantasm, and I like seeing a backstory to this version of Bruce Wayne, right? Like, it's the same, but it's got its own little added lore into it, which I've always loved about that movie, which is really cool.
That line about, I didn't count on being happy, was
my God, TAS,
heartbreaking. It's hard. It's
every time.
Batman Begins of Batman the Animated Series, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and it's one of those things where, given Kevin's life and his story with his family and how emotional it was, apparently at that record, it really was. He was really emoting. It really did touch something.
Yeah,
to the point where Andrea caught it and kind of like went in and gave him a hug after that reading.
Wow.
Because it was clearly like really, really connecting to him emotionally.
Yeah, and it comes through. I mean, it's literally just a voice, and it's so powerful, that scene. It's one of the best scenes he's ever done in anything.
Really, it really is.
Yeah, right? It's amazing. Absolutely. So you did a lot of episodes in the New Adventures of Batman, or Batman: The New Adventures. I always get confused at where those words go. I know. Especially because there's a comic now with, I think, Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, right? Yes. And it's called, I think it's called The New Adventures of Batman. So it's kind of
the Adventures Continues or something.
The Adventures. That's right. That's what it's called. But yeah, when they came with all the redesigns, and I think it moved to Warner Brothers, and that's where from looking at your roster of episodes, that's where you really started to like be a regular director on the show. Right. One of those first episodes of the new Batman Adventures was Cold Comfort, which is the Mr. Freeze episode. Yes. Always loved Mr. Freeze on the show. Always thought it was just an amazing depiction of the character. This episode in particular, because I think it was like episode 2 or 3 of the reanimated series, it stands out to me immediately. I think it's something that's always left an impression with me because, one, it's very adult themes. Like, the guy is literally, he's suffered the loss of his wife, and she essentially like saw him as a monster, and he started to deteriorate, and that's why he wants to take away what everyone loves. So I love how Mr. Freeze like reflects on what's going on in his life. But the thing that just scares the ever-living shit out of me, Dan, is when he comes out and he's just a head with mechanical spider legs. I just, as a kid, I remember seeing that and being like, this is frightening. And then I got the toy, and I remember even as the toy freaked freaked me out. Yeah. So
it's straight out of The Thing, isn't it? Like, it's those spy legs pop out.
It is. That was James Tucker boarded that sequence, and it was just brilliant. It was just brilliant the way the shadow comes in and we see it. It was so cool. I believe it was Glenn Murakami's idea. We were at lunch, and he just doodled this thing, and he's like, "What about this?" And Bruce is like, okay, that's what we're doing.
Well, so it was just Freeze's head with legs.
Yes.
Wow.
That's exactly it. And I was like a big Johnny Quest fan, so there was a robot spy thing with the big, the big eye on a stalk thing that the very similar.
Oh yeah.
And so it was, and to some degree, I think there was also this idea of like. Sub-Zero was a really well-made film, but Bruce didn't have anything to do with it. It was sort of like, it was Boyd and Randy did this thing separate, kind of on their own, and yet it was canon. So we were like, okay, so we're playing with this toolbox now, and we're playing with these, with their, within their sandbox, sort of. So how do we, do this other thing? How do we make it interesting for us now? How do we make it fun instead of just making another Mr. Freeze story and just keep going? So we have to find a way to justify. So the whole idea of his body having deteriorated kind of came out of like, where else do we go with him? How far do we push it?
Right.
And so that's I think where the justification.
I love that angle with that character. And then, in turn with canon, he becomes immortal and shows up later in Batman Beyond as just like a head, and he's lived for hundreds of years or something. Yes. Well, not hundreds, but decades and decades, and he's just a head in a jar. And
I know.
It's crazy. I love that stuff.
And it's one of those classic horror tropes too. It's like the B movie thing with the head in a jar. It's like the brain that wouldn't die and all these things. It's like,
like Reanimator or something like
that. Exactly. Who, was also eventually in our show. So,
was he?
Yeah. Jeffrey Combs was the Scarecrow later on.
Oh, of course.
My brother knows the ins and outs of everything. I don't. That's shocking to me. I didn't know.
Yeah,
that's right, because he's the new Scarecrow, right? When they did the revamp, and he's the one with the noose around his neck and like the cool like.
And that's the guy who played Reanimator. Then.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
I
blowing my mind.
The funny thing was how that worked. It was, and there's 2 instances where I helped cast the show. 3 kind of, sort of, maybe, not really, but it probably would have happened anyway. But when Bruce told us the story about the Gray Ghost, he mentioned that Gary Owens would be doing the voice of the Gray Ghost. And I thought, well, that seemed like Adam West should be doing it. Bruce went, oh my gosh. And then he ran out of the room, and that was the case. But
wow.
then I heard later on that Tom Ruger, who wrote the story, had always intended for Adam West to be the voice. And somehow that news didn't get to Bruce or Andrea. So that wasn't. Yeah, so here I'm thinking I was responsible, and actually it was like, no, not really. Actually, the writer.
Well, again, you had a good idea that everyone else.
In my mind, I had something to do with it, but
same as the trial, right?
It's a very Rashomon thing. It's like, yeah, but the reality, it was a little different. But I still feel that way,
Yeah, that's fine.
But this was Jeffrey Combs was. We did our. It's Hollywood. We were in Sherman Oaks, and we were in an office building next to a mall. So we would take our lunches at the food court at the mall, and so I was going up the escalator. He was coming down, and there was Jeffrey Combs, and I went, "Oh my gosh, there's the Reanimator! Oh wow!" And I asked him, "Would you be open to doing cartoon voices?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I ran back to the office, and I went, I bumped into Jeffrey Combs at the mall, and he wants to do cartoon voices. And Bruce is like, okay, I'll call Andrea, we'll get his agent and whatever. And he had just been thinking about the redesign for Scarecrow and wanting to do a new voice for him to match the redesign. And so we're like, yeah, this is the guy.
Was he drinking like a neon green slushie or anything like that?
No, he was just a regular guy, and he was just so wonderful that we cast him again on Justice League for The Question.
Okay.
And he just knocked it out of the park, and he was so great. And that was like supposed to be just one episode, and he was so great that they wove him into the last arc. He was so great. They kept bringing him back because he was really fun.
Crazy you can get a job just by going to shop around the mall, am I right?
Well, and then when we were doing Batman Beyond, I the same escalator. That's the magic escalator. It's like Schwab's. It's like Schwab's, the drugstore. I saw George Lazenby.
No way! I'm such a big fan of James Bond. Dan. You've noticed how I just sat up. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, my brother's a bit of a James Bond head.
And OHMSS is one of our favorite films, and we study that film for the editing, the filmmaking, and he's really very good in it.
He's a great Bond.
Anybody says he's fantastic, I will defend him. He's very, very good. He has that voice that just sort of like this Cary Grant quality to him that just
he's great. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also very loyal to the book as well.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. And I've never seen it.
No, you've never seen it. Yeah.
Really?
I'm not a huge Bond guy, and that's one that slipped past me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, the editing is incredible. The fight scenes, it was one of those things that helped inform our editing later on the show.
Wow.
We did actually start cutting things kind of like that for the action scenes on Superman and other shows, right? Because it's really it's an amazing film.
It is.
I
really
can tell
cool.
that's my brother's favorite tidbit information he's ever going to hear.
Well, from a guess, yeah. I mean, I've like messed up my green screen background because I like stood up like what?
It's going to start glitching into Hugh's office or something.
So the cool thing was he was I saw him, and that was one of those things where I saw him ran to Bruce. I'm like, Bruce, I talked to George Lazenby. He is open to do animation. We should get him for something. And we were in the middle of casting a Batman Beyond, and the Royal Flush Gang hadn't been completely cast yet. And so he's like, King, we'll get him for King. So,
do you know what, man? As much as I know so much about Bond, I never knew that Lazenby, a Bond, did a voice in the DCAU. Did not know that until now.
Well, if you watch the episode with the Royal Flush Gang, there's a scene where 10 is supposed to be deactivating undoing a lock for them to get in through the skylight. And in the script, it just said, he just said something like, take your time, take it easy, take your time, you'll get it. And then Bruce went, I have a rewrite in the record. and he writes down, "We have all the
time in the world." I love it.
And he read it and laughed, and he's like, "Oh, I can do this."
That's awesome.
I just actually,
and we all had chills when he said it.
Yeah,
and it was just like, "Oh, that's the greatest. We got it in there."
I just drew the Royal Flash Gang in a recent DC comic called Punchline.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you did. That's right. Yeah,
that was so cool because they've sort of rejuvenated the characters and changed them and stuff like that for a newer audience. So, and that's they're iconic characters for that series. That's for sure.
They really are. They really
wasn't
are.
there
we did 3 different versions now. We did 3 different versions because we did them in the Batman Beyond. Then we did an earlier version for the Justice League thing, and then we did they came back in a new permutation in Epilogue.
Yeah.
So they were in several episodes.
Right. And Will, didn't you draw recently? Wasn't there like a courtroom scene with a bunch of Batman villains in it, or like they're all sitting down?
It was a town hall meeting, and basically I was allowed to draw any Bat villains I wanted, and I just drew basically all my favorites from the animated series.
Yeah, that was cool. It's just art informing art, right? Like
that was a joke. Yeah. That was a Joker book for Joker, the Man Who Stopped Laughing.
That's right. Yeah, it's a cool book. So Dan, speaking about, I guess, different iterations of characters. Legends of the Dark Knight, another great episode. Really cool, really fun.
So fun.
I love how it's got different versions of Batman from the comics that we get to see in the sort of Bruce Timm style or the DCAU style. What was that like for you, directing the episode and the experiences you had with it?
A dream come true.
Right.
I'm one of these kids that I'm old enough, just old enough, because Bruce is a little bit like a year younger, so his introduction to Batman was the Adam West show. But I had an older brother who collected comics. So I had been exposed to the comics before I saw Adam West. And I was 5 when the show came out. So I'd actually at like 4, I'm seeing comic books in the house. I knew who Batman was. I had kind of like, and the version of Batman that I knew was the Dick Sprang, the annuals, all of that stuff. I knew that, and the cards that came out before the series, I collected those too. So to get to do the Dick Sprang Batman was like a dream come true because I love
great Joker in that. So good.
I mean, and again, I was always a fan of Batman from day one. I from like very young, before I could read, I was a Batman fan. And then the Adam West show just like, obviously distilled that. It just became, and then I fell in love with the Neil Adams version. But I never lost that appreciation for that Dick Sprang style. It was always one of those things where it's like, yeah, but this is Batman too. This is really cool.
Right.
It was, as children, it was our first exposure really to these different versions of Batman, because all we knew was Batman from either the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton movies or Batman the Animated Series. So, The Dark Knight Returns has turned into one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. But this show was actually my introduction to that iteration of the character, because I, as a 8-year-old, I wasn't picking up Dark Knight Returns from my local comic book store. Right.
Yeah, and that was the other thing too. It's like to get Frank Miller, his blessing, and to see him at San Diego after the show had aired, and tell me how much he appreciated it. It was really cool.
What a sequence to direct with, like, get it, son. This ain't an operating table. I know this ain't a mud hole. This is an operating table. Yeah. I messed up the coolest line of the whole thing, but you really did.
You butchered it so hard.
But it's amazing.
One of the things that was really cool about that too was that Kevin Michael Richardson, the voice actor, had. We called him in kind of late on the thing for some reason. I guess the character hadn't been cast for the mutant leader, and so he got a call to come in and do a record, and he hadn't seen the script, so he came in and saw the title and went, well, this isn't related to the Frank Miller comic, is it? And I was like, yeah, and he said, wait, what? The mutant leader? Are you kidding me? I'm doing the mutant leader? And he was a fan of the comic, and he knew his lines before he read them in the script. He knew what he was. He knew the comic. He started reciting the lines from the comic, and you're like, yeah, that's in the show.
We're going to do that now. Yeah.
We're going to do what?
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
That is cool.
And then it was also neat because then, Gary Owens was Batman for that version of Batman. And that was a really cool thing because we finally got to work with Space Ghost, and
right.
And that was a dream for me as well. And what was funny was that Tim Matheson had played Jace on the Space Ghost show. He was Johnny Quest as well, but he had done a voice for us and was doing ADR just before that we were recording, and he had left like 5 minutes before Gary Owen showed up, and I was like, oh man, we could have had a Space Ghost reunion here. And Michael McKean, who we know now from, we knew from, Saturday Night Live and This Is Spinal Tap and so many things, but also from Better Call Saul. Yep. And he was our Joker. And I remembered that he had done a really cool Vincent Price impersonation on Saturday Night Live, and I mentioned, that we can kind of lean into that kind of voice, and he kind of did that. He did that laugh, and he made it his own. He made it. It's not Vincent Price per se, but it's in that family. It's in that world.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he acts in the recent. Well, I guess not super recent, but they did an animated movie of Dark Knight Returns, and I'm pretty sure he's in that as well.
Wow!
I think he's I think he's his doctor.
Okay.
Joker's doctor in that.
Because that was a Bruce Timm produced film way later, obviously, and I personally I love that movie as well. But yeah, I mean, Legends of the Dark Knight, as my brother said, that was I haven't really thought about it until you just said it. That is our introduction to The Dark Knight Returns, is through that episode. Yeah, because we were too young to pick up,
I remember when you picked up the book. I think you were like 12 or 13. I remember you come bursting in the room like, you gotta read this. Like, it's like, you have no idea. This is not the Batman that you know. You need to read this.
Oh, it's just amazing. It's so
and what's neat is so many like. Yeah, James Tucker did the Dick Sprang sequence, and it was just phenomenal. And then, of course, he took that and kind of pushed the line work a little bit more and turned it into the Brave and Bold series, which is genius, brilliant series. I love that. And then Darwin Cook boarded the Frank Miller sequence.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. And then Glenn Murakami like took the boards and did like markers, color comps for it, and we kind of styled the color on what Glenn had done. I actually had a Golden Age comic that was given to me by a fan artist, John G. Fantuzio, who did all these fan covers, fanzines back in the 60s. And he traded comics with my brother. And he gave me this honestly, it was garbage. It was a piece of garbage, really, because it was a tattered copy of, I think, Batman number 49 or 50. I'm not sure. It was coverless, and it was the spine was messed up, and it was kind of moldy. But it was in this vegetable bag that we used to keep our comics in the 60s before the Mylar came out, and it was a treasure to me because it was my only Golden Age comic. Right. And I brought it into work, and Glenn was like, "Oh my gosh, because we didn't. How I'm going to put this without the reprints don't do anything justice. They don't follow the same colors. They're all on slick paper. The textures are different. The colors are different. It reads different than they did back in the old days. So there really is no way to actually know what the Golden Age comics are like without actually buying one and opening it up.
Right.
And so I had one. I was the only one on the crew that had an actual Golden Age comic. And so Glenn, who was art directing, was like used that as the guide for coloring the Dick Sprang sequence. That's fun. So all the black and white stuff and all that, star colors, all that stuff with the primaries away. It was based literally on that comic.
You said the cover was missing?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that's because back in the day, comic stores, if the issue didn't sell,
Oh
they
yeah,
would
yeah.
rip
They
the
still
cover off.
rip the cover off and then chuck them, and they have to.
Well,
Like,
no, I think you were allowed to post them back to DC and be like, "This didn't sell as well," and then
right.
now
You'd send the covers back, and then so that. But then those guys.
That's
were
insane. I didn't know that.
They would, but then they would get money back from
and they'd sell them anyway,
and then they'd sell them for a nickel. They would sell them for half price, And this was one of these things where it was he had gotten it at like. It's some carnival. It was like some carnival sale of somebody, like, a big pile of comics, and this garbage, really was something that you're always just so lucky that nobody threw it away, that some kid kept it for years, like, and reread it and it's a really good comic. It's a spring Joker story about bad luck. It's like the 13 Club. There's a story where Batman dies, and Robin has to go out to replace him, and it turns out that it was a scam because the lawyer was like scamming Bruce Wayne, and so they had to like find a way to, it's really, and so for some reason, Alfred wasn't in on it, but Robin was, so he has to go and find a fake. He finds some it's crazy. He finds a gymnast to wear the suit who's actually Bruce Wayne in disguise. So
as a coincidence.
But we don't know that as a reader. We're under the impression that it's this new guy that doesn't know what he's doing as Batman, and he's retrained. And so, which is weird because it's like the lawyer doesn't know that Batman is Bruce Wayne. I don't know how that would, how that would work.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's cool though, just hearing you talk about that, like how you were able to inject that type of style into Legends of the Dark Knight, and like pay tribute to that. And again, like, even as kids, even though we hadn't read those books, we got it. That these are different versions of Batman that obviously are from probably the comics. I think that's probably what I assumed.
We still had Batman 66 because we used to watch it at our grandmother's house all the time for some reason. And that Dick Sprang segment always just reminded me of the intro to that show.
Exactly. That was the intention.
Yeah. The Joker, especially in the way his cheeks look and his nose and such. That looks like the beginning of Batman 66. That's a good point. Yeah, and then, of course, you've got that little nod to Joel Schumacher, because obviously he was the director of the Batman movies at the time, and he was talking about like, I think he was talking about like the outfits that they wear and stuff like that. And I just think that, of the time, that's a fun little nod, because they're like, shut up, Joel, like basically like stop talking, you don't know.
I kind of feel like maybe we overdid it with like,
different time,
right? And it was, but you have to understand that there was a little hostility.
Of course.
He was kind of like, being kind of mean. And I thought maybe we did too much, but it was like, I mean,
it was at that time, Joel Schumacher is obviously the guy that's directing it, and you're in the limelight. I mean, Tim Burton got made fun of a bunch of times, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's a thing. We can all,
Yeah, exactly. And you can look back, and I get,
I don't think he took offense, but
no,
and
he probably didn't even know.
But the thing about Joel is that, he was doing what the studio had asked, and he really was making the films that they had wanted him to make. So,
and we all know that now, I think, but back then, obviously, we didn't know how much they were involved in all of that stuff. Like, we just talked to Randy Rogel, and literally the villain that was supposed to be in the Sub-Zero movie was Bane, before they were like, hey, we got Arnold Schwarzenegger. We want Mr. Freeze, and that was that's how much they were, they had their involvement in changing things, which is crazy. So Legends of the Dark Knight, another great one. And the other episode I really would like to talk to you about is The Demon Reborn. It's one that, so as a fan of Batman, I obviously have watched Batman the Animated Series so many times, and I did watch Batman Beyond and Justice League and Superman. I did check out all those shows as a kid, but Batman was just like the one that would always be the one I watched the most. So only over the last couple of years have I really dived into watching Superman the Animated Series properly, and like some stuff I remember, some stuff I don't. I remember coming across The Demon Reborn, and I'm like, okay, Demon Reborn, Superman, wonder what this is about. And then suddenly I'm like, whoa, League of Shadows, Ra's al Ghul, wait, hang on, Batman's in this? And I'm like, I felt like I was watching a new episode of Batman. You know what I mean? I was like, where has this come from? And I even talked to my brother, and he's like, yeah, man, like, you didn't know about that episode? He's like, that's really cool. I love that episode.
I had forgotten. There's a couple of things that I had forgotten from it. Was that I had forgotten that in World's Finest that Lois Lane knew that Bruce Wayne was Batman.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny because I've watched it and I love that film and I think it's really beautifully animated and it's a really fun thing. But for some reason, it escaped me that somewhere at the end of that, that somewhere in the middle of that story, she finds out, I know she's dating Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I knew, but it's like, but she doesn't know who Clark is Superman though, which is really like, wait, huh?
yeah.
How does that,
Because she sees Batman in this episode and she calls him Bruce and it's established she already knows. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Right.
So that was one of those things that was like, oh, yeah. I mean, I knew at the time, obviously. I was just, this is like 30 years later watching these things going, oh, yeah.
Because she's like, I was going to pick up the phone. There's a few times. And he's already out the room. He's gone, which I love so much. Like, that's
I gotta get better locks.
Yeah.
I gotta get better locks.
It's so funny that all these characters crossed over in these cartoons, and it took so long for the Hollywood studios to be like, wait, maybe the chocolate and peanut butter should go together. These characters mixing up. Because as kids, it was great. It was from Marvel's side and DC's side. It was all one big universe that we thoroughly enjoyed. And it just took so long. I remember for a while, you couldn't have Batman and any other media besides film on live action because the Hollywood execs said that would just confuse the audience. Like if Batman shows up in Smallville, then everyone's going to be very confused about the next Christopher Nolan movie. I don't know who ever said that, but I still think it's one of the stupidest things. One of the most like money losing things that a Hollywood executive has ever come up with.
Yeah. Well, the thing now, it's you're going to see something similar now because now they want to have a cohesive universe. So that there's going to be. I mean, I know James Gunn wants fun. He wants stuff to be interesting. So I'm sure, but. They'll logic something out so that to justify whatever, but it's like, but I think now at least there's going to be a singular control where there really wasn't. There was just like, now you can't have it. Because that was the thing. We'd have these embargoes where we weren't allowed to use elements of Batman on Justice League because he had his own series, The Batman. And so we couldn't use Alfred and we couldn't use Robin and we couldn't, and some of the villains were off the table unless we actually negotiated for them.
It did.
It did affect us. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
There were things, and then when Aquaman was being, propositioned as a new series, suddenly all of his villains were off the table, and then the Metal Men off. They were doing, and so we couldn't use Chemo for the Metamorpho show, and all these things were sort of like you were just sort of. Yes, you can have this entire world, all the Justice League all the characters in the DC universe, except you can't use this and this and this and this. And we weren't allowed to use the Vertigo characters. So at that time, Swamp Thing was Vertigo. So he was off the table, which I wanted to do Swamp Thing so bad. And then eventually cool. Say Swamp Thing show up in the Batman Harley thing. I'm like, oh, I wanted to
yeah.
But I got to do the Creeper. I got to do stuff from my childhood that I
love the Creeper.
Yeah. But and the Metal Men never got made as a cartoon until like I think Brave and the Bold showed them. So they did at least show up there, and all these things that we had like, oh man, it'd be cool to have a series based on Challenges of the Unknown, and we got to see them animated on that series. So at least they got their feet wet.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I love all of that stuff, and being able to play in that sandbox is really cool. So this is one of our favorite parts of when we have our guests on. It's a game that we play just for us, which is what memorabilia do you have from the show that you can show us, where all our listeners get to hear us go, ooh, look at that. Oh, that's cool.
Oh dear.
We've seen a few Emmys so far.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, mine's in the other room. Let's see. I have I'm more than this. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay. This is my stopwatch, and there was a sequence I timed on. Oh my gosh, with the Clock King episode. that I did.
Is that time out of joint?
Time out of joint. Time out of joint. Yeah. So this is the stopwatch I used to time that. This we had 3 of these. This is it reversed on yours or is it only reversed on mine? This is EFX.
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah.
Okay. So I have another one that says layout as well, and these are stamps that you would stamp notes on storyboards. And these would be the things that when you're like putting, okay, these are special effects for flame effects or whatever, you're giving the animators more information on the storyboard, and you stamp that and write, okay, this is going to be this, and this, and DX at 30%, and please add a diffusion filter at this percentage, and,
right.
So you'd have to put all that stuff down on paper, and so that's what those are. That's what these are little things that I've saved.
I see a Superman bust as well. Like
I have, yes, this these are toys. I don't have the maquettes; they're in the other room. But
don't worry. I mean, you don't have to run out the room. That's fine. It's just cool to see.
This is a Standee, Batman Standee.
Standee cut. Yeah, I love that cutout.
Do you have any animation cells?
Yes, I do, and I don't have them in the room with me. But that's one thing though. I met Bob Kane when I was working at DCAU. He was walking across the studio, and he saw Inspector Gadget and thought he could sue them because he thought it looked like Cool McCool character that he had done for Saturday Morning.
Of course, his first thought was, "I could sue them." That's very bold.
Money off of that.
Yeah. So he comes in and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Bob Kane,
right?
And we have a conversation, and then I mentioned that I had gone to SVA, School of Visual Arts, and Will Eisner was a teacher, and I knew they went to high school together. And he, right off the bat, he goes, Will Eisner thinks he's so great, but who today knows who the Spirit is? The whole world knows who Batman is. So I was like, I
feel like he
jealous much.
Yeah, like he said that to Stan Lee when he was going to the Batman. He was like, Spider-Man's not a movie yet. Everyone knows who Batman is. No one knows. And it's like, you just had to run. It's like, dude, why? You know?
Well, and the response is, and who knows who Bill Finger is, Bob?
Yeah, no shit. Yeah.
But he was kind enough to do this for me.
Wow. Actual sketches from Bob Kane.
Yeah.
Signed and everything. That's crazy.
Bats of luck. So,
Batman
and I got to
Robin.
see him draw it. So I know now, he can draw in a rudimentary sense. He can draw those things, But I also have a collection of Big Little books that he swiped for all the early stories that he had drawn. He traced them off of some Big Little book artist, Henry Vallely, and so we were using those panels as inspiration, the Big Little book stuff that inspired Bob Kane, and we had them pinned up all over the walls where we were working on the old show.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you do you have any of the original character concepts as well? You don't have to try and find them, but do you have? You were talking about when I was conceptualizing Man-Bat or this. Did you ever manage to keep any of those concepts that were early designs?
I do, and I wish you had mentioned this earlier. I would have had access to it better. For crying out loud. Bruce Wayne turnaround that Bruce was helping getting the proportions right on.
Okay,
so this is let's see.
I love that it's all just loose as well.
Yeah.
This is a rough design for the
SWAT?
For the SWAT team thing. And this is Bruce over what I was drawing.
Cool.
So that was
wow. All our listeners, I'm sorry you can't see any of this.
Yeah, this is amazing.
And this is my cleanup based on that became the model for the standard guy.
Right.
Oh my god!
So what type of pen did you use to ink that with?
I don't even know. Just a regular felt marker sometimes, and sometimes just a sharp pencil, and it would you would. We used a nice dark sharp pencil with Xerox like ink,
right.
But a lot of times we used fine point markers.
Interesting. So some of them weren't even originally inked; they were just done with a darker pencil and then Xerox. That's pretty cool.
Let's see.
Yeah, it is cool.
let's see here's some turnarounds of there's the Firefly. I didn't draw this, but
that's
I kept
awesome.
it because I worked on the episode. Let's see. Okay. There's the Demon. Now, again, not my episode.
Oh,
but
Etrigan.
Like the design, Etrigan.
Awesome.
With that Frank Miller Dark Knight body on him.
Yeah, that's right? Very Dark Knight Returns.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I thought it was for a second. I was like, wait a second, that's Etrigan. No, that's. Why would I have that?
I love that you just have all this stuff loose, and it's like the coolest thing to me.
Yeah, you're like, I guess I'll just go to this one random box on the floor with this treasure chest.
I
frame them, man, frame them.
I found other podcasts, so I had some stuff, and I was. Let's see what I got in my goodies here. Actually, most of this.
There's a reason you're wearing red, Dan. You're like Santa right now for me, just showing me all this cool stuff.
Well, actually, there's in Riddler's Reform. There's the director in that episode was based on me. So.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
I love that episode as well. It's one of my favorites. It's a great episode.
Yeah. But by the way, I just was watching the first episode of the Adam West Batman. Again, and I haven't seen it in a while. And
where he does the dance with the hands over the eyes.
Right. But it opens with Batman and Robin scaling the walls for the first time. They break into they see that the Riddler is robbing somebody, and they break in to stop the robbery. They attack the Riddler. And then turns out that it was all it was a sham.
He frames him, right?
Yeah, he frames him, and the whole idea of Batman and Robin confronting the Riddler, thinking that he's committing a crime, and he's not committing a crime,
is Riddler's reform.
Yes, and I was like, it didn't occur to me at the time that we were ripping off the. And when I was there, I was watching the show.
His plot's very different in 66 to Riddler's Reform. He doesn't have a toy.
I can't believe it's the same style plot.
Here's a Happy Meal box from when Batman was doing that. We had
that Joker car. We had those toys. That Joker car with the head on it. We had that McDonald's toy.
I learned how to ride a bicycle, and all of those knickknacks are on my bicycle.
Yeah.
And I tried to push off without training wheels, and I fell, and I landed on my Joker mirror, and it broke my heart.
Oh dear! Here's some more. I don't know if this is going to be a good memory or bad memory. Honestly, I enjoy this show, so whatever. But this was. These are okay. I don't know for this. I saw a portfolio at CalArts that was amazing. I love the artist, but there was nothing in there that said he could do what we wanted, what we needed for the show. This was when we were working on the New Adventures, and Bruce had said flat out, "I love this guy's work, but I don't want to ruin him. I don't want to make him into me." And meanwhile, this kid is like, "I want to be." Mold me,
right?
As K.O. Tongham was his name, is his name still, and brilliant portfolio. He had this weird kind of Kirby style, but it was surreal. And the second that we said no to his portfolio, the script came in, and we went, who we should get to design these monsters is K.O. And he had already gone back to Hawaii.
I know what episode you're going to talk about now and why you don't want to build it up. It is the episode Critters.
So K.O. would fax me hundreds of designs for
the giant locust is crazy.
Yes.
You remember that? It's like a Farmer Brown character world injects steroids into like all of these like farm animals, and they terrorize Gotham. It's a crazy episode. Dan, look, when we come to review that episode, because we like the Underdwellers, all right, man? We like I've Got Batman in My Basement. I think if we like those, there's probably a good chance we'll like Critters as well. It's like Jurassic Park in Gotham.
It is. It's a very, very odd show. We kind of always like the idea of like the big strong hillbilly girl thing, and we got to put that in there as a joke. We were like always joking about having this strong hillbilly gal, and we got to put it in the show. So that was one of those things that Let's see what else do I have. I'm sorry about the noise there. There's a Batman drawing I did recently.
Wow,
that's amazing.
That's amazing. just casually, just behind this.
This is somebody had put together a bunch of arms, Batman arms, and this was like a hand theory thing that somebody had done based on some of the ones that Bruce had done. It's upside down.
I've studied that.
In the model pack.
I've studied that for years.
So
that's right. You have studied that, Will, haven't you? Yeah, he's looked at that for his.
I've never seen the with the gloves thing, but
right.
I've seen the other hands.
Let's see what else.
I feel like a terrible artist right now.
Oh gosh, I know. I feel that way too. Oh my gosh, what I did.
I think he's saying, Dan, that he's looking at your stuff and he's damn it.
No.
Wow, that's a great Batman, man.
Cool.
That's so cool.
What else?
Why did I decide to try and draw like Tom McFarlane instead of Bruce Timm? I need to go back to my childhood and smack myself.
You could be drawing the new Batman Adventures Continues right now.
I actually, side story, I didn't tell you. I know the editor of that book, and I emailed him last night, and I just made this huge case email being like, "Look, I never do this, but I host a show about Batman the Animated Series. I've recently drawn Batman, Joker, the Royal Flush Gang. I drew them all like Batman the Animated Series. I love the show. I know this is super forward and like a lot, but please let me draw a cover for this book." We will see.
Fingers crossed. I hope you do. He's amazing.
A great editor. He's the editor that first gave me my work at DC, so hopefully.
Wow.
Okay, cool. And, Dan will just call up Paul Dini and be like, "Paul, I just met this kid named Will. He's pretty cool, man. You should probably give him a cover on the new Batman book." And then
give him a cover on the Batman book. This Batman's amazing. You should do a cover on the book.
This is Supergirl when after she was captured in Legacy. She was taken
by
down
Darkseid.
So this is when Hamilton is trying to help her, and Superman comes in to and this is actually we're setting the groundwork for Galatea later on in Justice League with this state. We actually reuse that later on. This is a Bruce revision on a joke in Justice League that where the Flash is yelling at Grodd. This is oh my gosh, what's his name? Solivar next to him, and he's like, "Yeah, and well, you're naked," and he's like reacts and he's like shrugs. Oh well, and then they go on. Oh, that was like a little joke that Bruce had me like, "How about this?" And yeah, okay, let's do that. So.
Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like we've got to have you back on again soon, Dan, because not only do you have loads of other episodes that we can review when we get to them, but it also sounds like you have loads of other stuff that if we ask you ahead of time, you can share even more with us.
Open a museum, man.
Yeah.
Oh, I should. Yeah, I know. I got to do that. That's the thing I got to do. It's a museum. Yes.
Well, before we head off, Dan, can you talk about anything that you're working on now? Where can people find you online if you want to direct them anywhere to check out your stuff? Any websites, anything like that?
I do have a danriba.com that has some storyboards and artwork on my website. And I'm setting up right now another event with CGC to do some cover illustrations and signings and whatever you got.
Awesome.
So.
Well, yeah, I'll include the link to your website in the description of this episode so people can go and check you out and see your stuff there and see, when you're doing signings and commissions and all that cool stuff. That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's just been a lot of fun. Like what I really love about all of the episodes you worked on, it's clear just by talking to you, you're a massive fan. You have a lot of influence in Batman in your life, and that comes through in your episodes, and then in turn influences other creators, like Will here and stuff like that. So yeah, big thank you, man. Your stuff is awesome. And
You're welcome.
We'll definitely have you back if you're up for it and talk about other episodes.
Sure. That would be my pleasure.
Awesome.
I'll prepare more stuff to show.
It was great, man. Thanks so much.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Well, that was fun. Who's for Chinese?